Controversy in the Inland Empire as a plan to move death row inmates to the state prison there moves forward.
The Chino Institute for Men. This is all according to the mayor of Chino and the city of Chino putting out a statement. They say that these inmates are being transferred to this prison, and they don't believe that the prison is equipped to house these death row inmates.
It's just irresponsible to put death row in a residential community.
Welcome to our special segment on the origins of the California Institution for Men, or CIM, located right here in Chino. Established in 1941, CIM was not just the fourth state's prison in California, it was a pioneer in the realm of rehabilitation. Breaking away from the conventional prison design, CIM introduced open spaces and dorm settings, aiming to transfer the lives of its inmates. This forward-thinking approach emphasized teaching life and job skills, marking a significant shift on how rehabilitation was handled. Join us as we explore the groundbreaking beginnings of Chino's own state prison. In the early years of California's Institution for Men, the groundwork was laid out long before its opening. During the 1901 State Charities Conference in Oakland, the need for a new prison in Southern California was addressed. Influential voices like San Quentin chaplain and librarian August Droms advocated for a shift in the purpose of imprisonment, from a punishment to a reform. Droms emphasized that the goal should be to reform the incarcerated, a principle that should later shape the foundation of CIM. It is the axiom of penology that the worst prisons turn out the worst prisoners, and the best prisons turn out the best prisoners. The idea of reformation strikes one at once. Droms went on to say another prison was needed. Quote, "I advocate for another prison to be built in the southern part of the state. The saving in the railroad fare would pay for it. It should be composed of 3 sections, one for whom reform is possible, one for first-termers, and one for young men. It would result in moral and intellectual improvement of prisoners and pave the way for their reform." 8 years later, the Board of Charities and Corrections again urged the state to create another institution for young offenders. Unfortunately, constructing a reform-minded men's institution would take another 4 decades. A 1940s issue of the San Francisco Chronicles reported, "New plans for California's prisons include a long-range program for separation of 9,000 felons into different criminal types. San Quentin will house 3,000 convicts and will serve as a receiving ward. Incorrigibles and tough guys will be sent to Folsom, which will be maintained as a maximum security prison. Youthful first offenders will be routed to Chino, the new prison under construction east of Los Angeles." A 1941 advertisement for the employment at Southern California Prison, located at Chino, sheds light on the early goals and visions for what would eventually be known as the California Institution for Men. The advertisements describes the prison as occupying 2,500 acres on fine farm land, and characterized it as a minimum security institution for first offenders. The primary aim highlighted in the ad was the prompt rehabilitation of its inmates, emphasizing a focus on quick and effective reformative processes. It goes on to state that hope, encouragement, and the instilling of useful habits of work will be stressed at the end, that man may be returned to society in the shortest possible time, prepared to take their part in the economic and social life of their communities, and to support themselves and their dependents. Called supervising officers, the ad indicates that they will be responsible for individual and group supervision of inmates assigned to them, to include custody, direction of work, and the supervision of educational and recreational periods. Supervising officers will be required to govern and control inmates properly by leadership, ingenuity, and force of personality, rather than by relying solely upon guns. These supervising officers were said to be paid a salary of $120 per month, capping at $200 per month after annual merit-based raises. CIM was officially opened in June 21, 1941, and is recognized as the first minimum security facility in the United States, as stated by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. It was the 4th correctional facility established by the state of California, designed specifically to alleviate overcrowding in San Quentin State Prison, which was built in 1852, and Folsom State Prison, constructed in 1880. CIM stood out in the field of penology as the prison without walls. Its only form of security was a modest 5-strand barbed wire livestock fence, which was primarily intended to keep the dairy cows from being strayed into the living areas, rather than to contain the inmates strictly. With the opening of California Institution for Men in Chino under Kenyon J. Schroeder in 1941, California's correctional system was exposed to a group who were generally young and inexperienced in correctional matters, but well exposed to the ideas of thinking prevalent at the time in the fields of social science, psychology, anthropology, and related subjects in the universities. The May 1994 issue of Corrections News details some of Schroeder's methods. When Kenyon J. Schroeder, a veteran penologist with the progressive ideas, was appointed warden of CIM in 1941, he insisted on having a free hand in the selection of the training of men who would staff the new institution. Of the 50 men Schroeder selected to supervise inmates, 45 were college graduates with 4 holding master's degree. In addition, 9 had general secondary teaching credentials. Training of the staff included 2 hours each day of theory in handling men, some sociology, psychology, problems of discipline, and general philosophy of governing the institution, 2 hours each day in martial arts. The balance was devoted to the work of the institution itself. The initial group of incarcerated individuals arrived at the California Institution from San Quentin on July 10, 1941. These 34 carefully screened men set the tone for the institution for many years to come. The CIM pamphlet also goes on to state significant early shifts in the institution's focus. One of the first changes in the institution's mission came in 1941 when a conservation camp was opened in San Bernardino County. A 30-man crew was supplied from the institution. The primary purpose was to repair equipment and tools. Those first CIM officers made their way through the state's growing corrections department. As this group spread throughout the department and interacted with the experienced correctional personnel, a few sparks were struck, but the results were generally constructive and productive for better programs, Stutzman wrote in 1964. When the California Department of Corrections was founded in 1944, all existing staff were incorporated into the state. The blanketing of all positions under civil services within the department, plus the arrival of Richard A. McGee as director in 1944 and his policy to interchange of personnel between institutions, resulted in a synthesis of new ideas and old ideas, techniques and procedures through the department, which, I am sure, was of mutual benefit to all institutions, Stutzman wrote. World War II veterans became correctional officers at CIM. Among the early correctional officers at CIM was William Richard Wilkson. In his memoir titled Prison Work, he recounts his career with the department spanning from 1951 to 1981. The inmates do their time, they get their training, they go out and get a job, he wrote. You could see that at Chino, and there was education for inmates. If you did not have a high school education, then you could spend half your day in class and the other half picking tomatoes or shucking corn or whatever you had to do. You have to work to survive, and you have to have an education to make it. At Chino, they made room for both. He recounted that, on his first night of the job, he learned an invaluable lesson. As a World War II veteran, he understood the extent of his capabilities and intelligence. However, he quickly realized that working in a correctional facility meant that any sense of cockiness had to be left behind. There were 70 men in the barracks. I sat in the middle in a little open office right next to the toilet area so that I could watch everything. He recalled, I could probably tell you every man who rolled over bed, every man who passed gas, every man who snored. I had them all down pat. But when he took a break, he was in for a surprise. About 3 o'clock in the morning, I went to eat my lunch. I opened my lunch box, and it was empty. It had a note that said, "Thank you very much." Best break-in period I ever had. I knew I didn't know a damn thing. That lunchbox was washed out, and there was no way they could get into that sink in the bathroom without my seeing them and hearing the water running. And that lunchbox was not out of my sight all night long. Anyway, that started me off right. They were clever, and you had better keep your eyes open. And you don't know a damn thing about them. Wilkinson also recalled the old wooden floors. Before they put the cement floors in the barracks, as you walked along, it would rock the bunks, and they were double bunks, he wrote. So you had to be kind of careful as you went down, or you would have inmates growling and complaining. He fondly recalled his time at CIM. The institution at Chino was different, he wrote. It's a new concept. All the traditional prison people put it down, in terms of a prison. He said part of the difference was due to the superintendent, Scudder. Scudder had another principle, he wrote. He would not hire anybody who had worked at a prison before. He wanted people who didn't have any prison background. He did not want to have a bunch of ideas to get rid of. He gave us this philosophy on day one. We had been there for 15 minutes. We knew exactly what he wanted, how he wanted to do it, and how we're going to help him do it. According to Wilkinson, one notable distinction at the time was that there was no locks on the doors back then. So here was a man with ideas that were not traditional, and this would appeal to the 20-somethings who had just saved the world in World War II, he wrote. It was a big operation with the farm and cannery. We grew everything down there. Produce, corn, and what have you, was distributed through the state by prison industries. And then we had the slaughterhouse and the dairy. That was a great place, probably for my own benefit. I should have stayed down there. The program at Chino was ideal. Education, vocational training. Wilkinson advanced in the ranks to sergeant and subsequently to lieutenant, before transferring to the California Medical Facility in Vacaville in 1955. In 1977, he moved to the Correctional Training Facility in Soledad. He retired in 1981 and published his memoir in 2005. Wilkinson passed away in 2013. By 1947, the demand for additional prisons was evident. Department Director Richard A. McGee highlighted this in a report to Governor Earl Warren. The findings of this report were discussed in the May 8, 1947 issue of the Sausalito News. McGee's report stated, California's prisons populations now total to 8,323 and is continuing to climb, the newspaper stated. San Quentin's prison population is 63% over its normal capacity. Other prisons were equally overcrowded, and according to the report, the women's prison at Tehachapi is 73% over capacity, Folsom is 34% over capacity, and Chino was 82% over capacity. For 4 decades, the California Institution for Men was operated as the prison without walls. However, in 1983, walls and guard towers were constructed to address the concerns related to inmate escapes, marking a significant shift in the facility's security measures. This change, although beyond the scope of this video, provides context to the historical development of the prison's infrastructure. I hope this video gives you a clearer understanding of why Chino Prison is located where it is today, and if you found this information interesting, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, let me know in the comments what you'd like to learn about next. Thank you so much for watching. You have a great day.